It was a bitterly cold November morning in Marlo, Iowa, when Officer Daniel Brooks began his patrol 5 minutes later than usual. Had he stuck to his regular schedule, he might never have seen the dog. And without that dog, perhaps 40 young women would still be trapped in the darkness beneath a church no one thought to question. Marlo's streets looked like a scene from an old postcard. Bare trees etched sharply against a pale sky, the heavy scent of wood smoke lingering in the air, and every step crunching on frost. The town was quiet, as it always was before the first coffee was poured at the diner. At a Main Street intersection, Daniel's eyes caught something unusual. On the steps of the old St. Mark's Church sat a German shepherd, motionless, his gaze locked on the heavy oak doors. No collar, no leash, just a body vibrating with tension. His ears were pricked, his breathing steady, but his posture was that of an animal that knew something. Daniel had worked with dogs, trained with canine units. He recognized instantly that this dog wasn't here by chance. "Hey buddy," he called softly through the rolled-down window. The dog didn't stir, his eyes fixed on the doors as if they held a secret. The light turned green. Daniel drove on, but the image of the dog seared itself into his mind. 2 days later he saw him again, same spot, same posture, same eerie focus. This time, Daniel parked across from the church. The morning wind bit at his cheeks as he stepped out. "Where's your owner, pal?" The shepherd turned his head briefly, his amber eyes assessing Daniel before snapping back to the doors. Daniel climbed the steps slowly, his boots echoing on the stone. The dog tensed not in fear, but as a warning. Up close, his coat was thick and muscular, his stance that of a working dog trained to find what others missed. "You're really fixated on that door, huh?" Daniel muttered. The church was silent, too silent. A faint hum came from within, perhaps an old heater, but no footsteps, no voices. A narrow stained-glass window beside the building, just above ground level, was darker inside than it should have been. Daniel shook off the thought. He wasn't here to start rumors. Over the next week, Daniel passed St. Mark's every morning. The dog was there each time, rain, wind, or frost. Sometimes he sat like a statue, sometimes he paced the top step, nose working, tail rigid, but he never left. One afternoon, curiosity won. Daniel brought a water bottle and a sandwich. The dog sniffed the food, ate quickly, then returned to his post without so much as a tail wag. That's when Daniel heard it, a faint rhythmic tapping from inside the church, so soft he first thought it was the wind. It came again. Daniel froze. The next morning he asked around town. Most in Marlo barely thought about St. Mark's. It was a landmark, home to weddings, funerals, and charity drives. But when Daniel mentioned the basement, faces changed. "Sealed off for decades," said Joe from the diner. "Structural damage, not safe down there." Daniel frowned. No signs of repairs, and why seal it instead of fixing it? Reverend Clay, the pastor, was polite when Daniel stopped by later. But when the basement came up, his tone sharpened. "Nothing down there anymore," he said quickly. "Locked for safety?" "Mind if I take a look?" Daniel asked. Clay's smile was tight. Nothing to see. That night, driving past, Daniel caught a shadow moving behind an upstairs church window in his headlights. The room was supposed to be storaged, dark and empty. He slowed. The dog was on the steps again, motionless. A chill ran through him. By the end of the second week, his gut was screaming. He tried calling animal control, but the dog was never there when they arrived, as if he appeared only for Daniel. One morning, heavy snow blanketed Marlo. Daniel figured the dog would seek shelter. But as he turned onto Main, there he was, fur-dusted, white eyes locked on the doors. Daniel pulled over. "You're one stubborn mutt," he said, stepping into the snow. The dog stood, shook himself off, and trotted to the side of the church. Daniel followed, crunching through drifts, until they reached a small steel door, half buried in snow. A heavy padlock hung from its latch. The dog growled, low and steady, the sound vibrating in the cold air. Daniel stepped closer. The lock looked newer than the door. He knelt beside the dog. "What are you trying to tell me, buddy?" The shepherd's eyes stayed on the door. A sound reached Daniel's ears, barely audible over the wind. A muffled, almost human sob. He froze. It came again. His stomach tightened. He grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, this is Brooks. I need a supervisor at St. Mark's. Bring bolt cutters, and make it quick." Dispatch hesitated. "Address again," Daniel repeated. This time the response came after a pause. "Copy, units en route." Snow kept falling as the first cruiser pulled up beside the church. Red and blue lights washed over the stone facade, fleeting his breath on glass. Officer Mia Gutierrez stepped out, bracing a boot on the icy curb. "Brooks," she called, "found a lock that doesn't want company." Daniel pointed his flashlight at the steel door. The shepherd, now known to all as Ace, stood rigid beside it, ears pricked, a low growl rumbling in his chest. "Listen," Daniel said. At first, only the wind whistling through bare branches was audible. Then, faint but unmistakable, a muffled sob carried through concrete and snow. Mia's eyes met his. "Sure, that's not a pipe. Pipes don't cry," Daniel replied. Sergeant Willis arrived, a man built like a wall, his gaze peering over his glasses rather than through them. "Tell me everything," he said. "No nonsense." Daniel recounted the dog, the door, the sound. He kept his voice steady, but the knot in his gut was undeniable. "Anything concrete, visual on a victim?" Willis asked. Daniel glanced at the lock, then at Ace, whose stare pierced the door like an arrow. "I can't tell you who's behind it, Sarge, but someone's there." "Church property," Willis muttered, eyeing the steeple. "Pastor's inside," Mia said. Willis nodded. "We do this by the book." Reverend Clay met them at the door, coat thrown over pajama pants, a scarf looped crookedly around his neck. "Officers, what's happened?" Willis took point. "Reports of suspicious noises. We'd like to check the exterior and walk through the common areas." Clay hesitated, just long enough for everyone to feel it, then stepped aside. The church's warmth hit them wood, candle wax, the scent of community. Ace stayed outside, his eyes tracking them through the doorway. The search revealed nothing unusual until they found the basement access, a wooden door, seamlessly blended into the wall, with 3 deadbolts and a missing padlock. Dust lay like a veil on the floor. Clay claimed the basement had been sealed for years, but the door looked used. Daniel pressed his ear to the wood. Nothing. Then Ace barked outside, a short, urgent sound that snapped every head toward the steps. Willis decided. We checked the side door. Back in the snow, Daniel knelt by the lock. It was expensive, weatherproof, new. A narrow patch on the door was frost-free. Warm air had escaped. "Feel that?" he asked. Mia nodded. Willis called for bolt cutters and blankets. When the bolt cutters arrived, Daniel set to work. The lock snapped with a crack, like a bone breaking. He lifted the hatch. Warm, damp air rushed out, laced with the smell of fear and unwashed clothes. A short stone staircase led down. "No one goes alone," Willis said. Daniel and Mia descended, Ace held back by Willis. At the bottom, another door waited, old, damp, with a simple latch. Daniel pushed it open. A narrow hallway stretched out, warm and stifling, a bare bulb flickering. The floor was lined with plastic carpet. They moved cautiously, shoulders brushing the walls. A room opened, larger than it had any right to be beneath a church. Cots, folded blankets, a card table with cards scattered as if abandoned mid-game. A faint clink came from deeper within, like a spoon tapping a mug. They followed the sound. Another door, secured with a chain but no lock. Daniel lifted the chain. Beyond it, another hallway, walls of fresh but shoddily built plywood. Another clink. At the end, a cheap wooden door, like one from a rental. Daniel turned the knob. The room was small, empty save for a blanket and a pair of neatly aligned shoes. On the wall, scratch marks, tally lines, and the word "please" carved with a fingernail into the wood. Mia swallowed. Someone was here. Ace barked outside, a sharp sound cutting through the walls. Daniel called to Willis. "We've got evidence of presence. We're going deeper." A hidden plywood panel gave way, revealing another staircase, rough and damp, voices barely audible like breaths trying to hide. Daniel reported. "We hear voices." The air grew heavier as they descended. At the bottom, a final door, green paint peeling. Daniel pushed it open. The smell hit first, wet metal, fear. His flashlight caught eyes, dozens of them. Young women, tangled hair, worn clothes, blinked into the light. "We're police," Daniel said calmly. "You're safe now." One woman stepped forward. "Please," she whispered. "Don't close the door." "We're not closing anything," Daniel promised. "We're getting you out." Over the radio, he called for backup. "Willis, we've got multiple victims, female, late teens to mid-20s, need EMS and more units now." Ace's bark echoed from above, as if he understood. The women were led upstairs in groups, some supporting each other, others walking alone. Daniel counted. 41, with cropped black hair, paused at the door. "The dog," she said. "He was here for days." Daniel nodded. "He made sure we found you." Upstairs, the church was a flurry of blankets, medics, and quiet voices. Ace moved among the women, sniffing gently, his tail wagging slowly. Willis approached Daniel. 40 total. The guy's not here. Must have bolted when he saw the cars. Daniel's jaw tightened. "We'll find him." A clue came from one of the women. Emma, barely 20. She'd overheard a name, Clayton. Whether first or last, she didn't know, only that he used it on the phone before disappearing through a door the women never saw. Mia jotted it down. Outside, snow kept falling, the scene eerily calm, but Ace's gaze drifted to the street, as if he knew someone was still out there. A 911 call interrupted the night. An aborted call from the industrial district, near the old Frey warehouse. Daniel, Mia, and Ace headed out. The warehouse loomed like a rusty giant against the sky. A single light burned above a side door, slightly ajar. Fresh boot prints led inside. Ace shot forward, nose to the ground. Inside, it was cold, the air heavy with wood and rust. The prints led to a metal staircase. Ace froze, growling. Daniel shouted, "Police, show your hands." A figure moved above, a man, medium build, in a dark jacket. He ran. Ace chased, claws scraping metal. On the catwalk, the dog caught him, leaping and pinning him without biting. Daniel cuffed him. You have no idea what you've stepped into, the man spat. Oh, I think I do, Daniel said. 40 women, to be exact. The man was Clayton Heller, a name tied to dropped charges in Missouri and Nebraska. Back at the church, Daniel found a map behind paint cans not just of Marlo, but half the county, marked with red X's. An abandoned motel, an old school, a shuttered diner. He had more places in mind, Willis said. Or already used them, Daniel muttered. The next days were a race. Daniel, Mia, and Ace checked the marked sites. An old diner yielded footprints but no finds. An abandoned school revealed 3 more women in a basement. Farm after farm was searched, each with traces of life: a scarf, a water bottle, a child's shoe. Finally, they reached a house with smoke curling from the chimney. Ace's growl warned them. Inside, they found a man not Clayton, but clearly involved. Beneath a rug was a trapdoor, and behind it, 14 women. One, barely 16, whispered, "We heard the dog. We thought it was a dream." In the end, 89 women were rescued. The map, now covered in notes, hung like a battle plan in the precinct. The final night was still. Daniel and Ace stood before St. Mark's. The church now chained shut, the basement sealed by court order. Ace sat on the steps one last time, eyes on the door. Then he stood and nudged Daniel's leg, ready to move on. But the story didn't end there. Weeks later, as the case faded from headlines, Daniel got a call. A new clue: a second map found in Clayton Heller's cell, with markings beyond the county. Ace, now officially Daniel's partner, lifted his head as the phone rang. Daniel looked at him, ready for the next round. Buddy Ace's tail wagged once. Resolute. Somewhere out there, another secret waited, and Ace would find it, as he always did.